Hello, and welcome to this conversation on joy and suffering. My name is Meryl Herr, and I serve as the Director of Research and Resources at the Max De Pree Center for Leadership at Fuller Seminary. In our work, we create research-backed resources to help you work and lead in a distinctively Christian way. This conversation is part of our Cultivating Joy project. In early 2024, we conducted 25 interviews with executive level leaders who are Christians to understand how they experience joy in the workplace. Today, we're going to discuss one of the emerging findings from the data with joy expert Dr. Angela Williams-Gorel. Angela provides inspiration, encouragement, guidance, training, and soul care to individuals so that they can do their jobs better and feel healthier while doing it. She helps both individuals and teams seek the life worth living, connect, find deeper meaning, and come alive. Angela has been a consultant for multiple organizations, including the U.S. Army. She speaks regularly online and in person across the U.S. and in other countries at universities like Yale and leads workshops, webinars, conferences, private retreats, and lecture series. Her research has been highlighted in media sources such as the New York Times, NPR, and the Washington Post. She has a PhD and 21 years of experience mentoring, speaking, teaching, planning, and guiding. She's the author of Always On and the Gravity of Joy, and her next book, Braving Difficult Decisions, debuts this fall from Eerdmans. I've invited Angela to talk with me about the connection between joy and suffering, something she's learned about in both her research and her everyday life. Thanks, Angela, for being here. I'm really glad that you're joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for your invitation. I'm really eager to talk with you about these questions and about joy and suffering and how they're related. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So, as we get started, I want to talk to you about your work with the Yale Center for Faith and Culture. So, you did a big project with them a few years ago on joy. Your book came out of that time. So, tell us a little bit more about that project and how you engaged in it.
At the time, joy was the most understudied, under-researched positive emotion and so our team took up the project of saying, what is joy? How do we cultivate it? How do we think about it from different philosophical and religious traditions? And specifically as Christians, how do we think about joy? What is a theology of joy? So we took up this question and versions of it, and we were given through a project proposal, given a grant by the John Templeton Foundation. They funded this project for $4.2 million, a huge grant, which allowed us to take this very understudied, very misunderstood emotion. I think one that had been largely collapsed into happiness,
Mhm.
and really to think about it, and especially that it had really only been studied a little bit by psychologists,
Mhm.
and to allow people from all different kinds of fields and perspectives and backgrounds and traditions to think about what is joy from their perspective. And so about 234 scholars, I think,
Mhm.
both emerging scholars and senior scholars from multiple fields, like every field you can think of, philosophers to literature professors to emotion people to neuroscience, et cetera. And over 140 institutions, and then also practitioners, faith practitioners from all different faiths, contributed to this project. And so when they came to consultation meetings with us, they wrote papers. We would debate with each other about our ideas and our thoughts and our theories over the course of a number of days. And then many of those papers turned into journal articles and books and videos and other resources, talks that people have given. And so that work started in March 2016. And for some of us that were a part of the project, it continues like me today in
Hmm.
2004. Yeah.
Yeah. So going into that project, what were you hoping to focus on in your research and your work, and where has it led you? Like, where are you thinking about that today?
Yeah. In March 2016, when I was hired, I was about to be a newly minted PhD, so I was graduating in early June. And I got this job a few months before. And so I started working online for the Yale Center for Faith and Culture from a distance, and then eventually moved there in June 2016 to Connecticut to work at Yale. And I was overjoyed, literally. I thought, this is incredible. Not only do I have a job and I can pay my rent, you
Mhm.
know, but I get to study joy for a living. Are you
Mhm.
serious? This is incredible. At Yale with Miroslav Volf, like one of the premier and leading
Mhm.
theologians of our time, like I just thought life couldn't get any better. And then 8 months into the project, three of my family members died in 4 weeks. And I went from really wanting to write a book on how do we cultivate joy in our lives. Um, and I think it was more of like a practice-based book
Mhm.
to life is not joyful.
Mhm.
Life is a long walk toward death.
Mhm.
It's joy, like it was for me, it was laughable.
Mhm.
Because not only did three people die in 4 weeks, but they were all very tragic in their own way. Like my family member Dustin died at 30 by suicide. 2 weeks later, my nephew died very suddenly, out of nowhere at 22 of sudden cardiac arrest. He had after an autopsy was done, a previously unknown heart condition. So just felt like such a sense. I mean, to this day, it feels like such a senseless death. And then 5 days after my nephew's funeral, my dad died
Mhm.
after 12 years of addiction. And so addiction, senseless death of a young person, suicide, you kind of like just go into not just grief, but like profound grief
Mhm.
where the whole world for me became gray. Like it's like I almost like couldn't see color anymore. And I like woke up. I remember like a number of months after my dad's death, I woke up and I like was already angry. Like just
Mhm.
waking up made me angry.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, this project that had captured my heart, like, was a burden.
Mhm.
It was like, how do I keep, and so it's like I went from reading everything I could get my hands on about joy to avoiding it as much as possible,
Mhm.
to just doing the things I needed to do in my job, focusing mostly on the quantitative and qualitative research methods part of my job, deciding I wasn't going to write about joy anymore. It wasn't mine to do. Literally, it was just,
Mhm.
and for a year and a half, that was me. Like a year and a half, I really struggled with this concept of joy in life. Um, and then I became a volunteer chaplain at a women's maximum security prison. And the only thing to say about that is that it was this like divine invitation in the midst of church, this nudge in my spirit where it was like I could not say no. It was like,
Mhm.
you must say yes to this. And God just told me in this service, Angela, I have something there for you. Like, I'm not sending you there to help these women. I'm sending you there because they're going to help you. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go and sit with these women on Wednesday nights. And all of a sudden, it comes together over the coming months. But essentially, these women, I was assigned very strange, I mean, like strangely or mysteriously, sacredly, I don't know, to the women on suicide watch at
Mhm.
the prison. And the overwhelming majority of the women in my Bible study on Wednesday nights struggled with addiction. And so I began to understand the pain of my family members,
Mhm.
their experiences in new ways. And then these women were the people who taught me about the work of joy in the midst of suffering.
Mhm. Yeah. And just for our listeners, you go really in depth in this journey in your book, The Gravity of Joy. And we want to commend that to everyone to read to hear more about that. But I appreciate you telling us about that journey now. And so let's talk about, you probably went into that project thinking joy was one thing. And now on the other side, maybe shaped by a lot of experience and many more years of wisdom. How would you define joy?
Yeah, and I will say too that it was a very like spontaneous outpouring. Like it was a few weeks after starting to meet with these women that I just began to write about what they were teaching me and what we were
Mm.
experiencing together on Wednesday nights and what God was doing in my heart. And then before I know it, like there's this book like flowing out of me. So it was very much like, oh wow, oops, like I that's the book, it came out, but it wasn't about so much about like how to get more of joy. It was
Mhm.
more about what is it? That
Mhm.
I think we did have to start. I had to start there. I think we have to all start there. And
Mhm.
I think initially I would have said, I don't know how to describe joy. That's why I want to be on
Mhm.
this team. It's just sort of like one of those things that I feel like the moment you define joy, you diminish it. Um,
Mhm.
and then also it's one of those things that like you just know it when you feel it, when you see it.
Mhm.
But there are two definitions that I did find helpful and I have over
Mhm.
the past 8 years. And one is drawing partly on the work of Adam Potke in his book, The Story of Joy.
Mhm.
Joy is an illumination,
Mhm.
he says. And I would say the ability to see beyond to something more.
Mhm.
And it's in any given moment, it's this experience of there's more here
Mhm.
between us than actually we can see with our eyes. There's
Mhm.
something more. And I think it's the something more that
Mhm.
makes life worth living, that makes life feel meaningful.
Mhm.
And then the other definition that I found helpful is joy is the recognition of and the connection we feel to meaning,
Mhm.
truth, beauty, goodness, one
Mhm.
another, God. And
Mhm.
so if we want more joy in our life, what we have to do is to live open to look for,
Mhm.
and to make sense of the connections between us and
Mhm.
meaning, truth, beauty,
Mhm.
goodness, one another, God.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear both of those definitions. In our research, we asked our participants how they define joy and how they would describe what it feels like. And I was surprised by how many people talked about joy in relational terms. Not
Mhm,
just, oh, I have this experience I want to share, but it's embodied in this relationship that I have with someone else, or it's working with my team in a certain way, or seeing the success of a particular individual.
mhm,
And yet at the same time, they also talk about it as elation, right? There's this kind of, um, they all often would wrestle well with its happiness, but not really. It's more than happiness. It's deeper. It's truer. And we had asked them to reflect on something that had happened in their work that was good. So we're trying to tap into what do you think is good in work, and how do you feel? And so many would get to joy, but yeah, there were people that had trouble, landing a definition because maybe it's not part of their vocabulary because it's,
mhm.
subsumed under happiness, like you've said, or just because we don't talk about joy very much and what it means and what it looks like. Um, so you've given these two definitions. I want to also ask you how you describe joy. What does it feel like? And you can feel free to tap into an experience, or, one of our participants said it feels like a field of butterflies, or it's Maria von Trapp twirling around at the beginning of Sound of Music. What does joy feel like for you?
Yeah, I think relational is a really helpful way of thinking about joy. It generally is always about relationship in some way. It's probably why every invitation in the Bible uh, related to joy, to rejoice, is an invitation to y'all
Mm,
rejoice. And we often think about the Bible and its invitations in very individual terms, probably as Americans, because we're so individualistic in our ways of life. And yet the Bible's invitations are really like, hey, y'all rejoice together.
mm,
And because we need one another often
mm,
to even be able to think about the good or what's meaningful or beautiful. And
mhm,
and then but also like Miroslav says, like if happiness is pleasure, joy is meaning plus pleasure,
mhm,
or pleasure plus meaning. And so I think that's the thing maybe that was underneath what people were saying too, that like it's deeper, it's truer,
mhm,
like about meaning. It's
mhm,
so last week I am at Hermosa Beach with my nephew Ro, and we've been really close his entire life. Like I met him a couple days after he was born, and we've just like been buddies for the last 7 years, and lived really close to my sister and her family for a number of years while I was a professor in Texas. And so, anyways, we're really close. So he comes out here last week, and one thing that we share is just like this deep love for the ocean, and we love to swim in the ocean. and jump waves, but he's still like a little guy, and he's still like, and the ocean last week was crazy. It was like really windy.
Mm,
There was really like the riptide was crazy, the current was crazy. And
mm,
so the lifeguards are like, have everyone on guard, and but he has to like jump these waves because this is like making him even more excited. And as we're jumping the waves, we're holding hands, we're jumping them together, and he shouts out, "Thank you, ocean. Thank you so much. These are the
mm,
best waves I've ever had in my life." And he's like, "Right, Angel, these are the best. This
mm,
is the best day." And I'm like, "It is. It's such a beautiful
mm,
day." And it wasn't just that we were there was happiness there. We were
mhm,
laughing. It was fun. It was funny. Like we were getting pummeled by these waves, and for me in that moment, there was profound joy because
mm,
of this shared moment between this
mm,
person that I adore, my sister's son. You know,
mhm,
there's this, and there was a joy in that moment for me that he saw the
mm,
goodness of creation, that he had an appreciation for the ocean, that he's like,
mhm,
there was gratitude there, right? So it wasn't just happiness. There was this deeper thing happening between us, between him and the ocean,
mm.
that elicited an incredible amount of joy for me.
That's amazing. That's a great story and a great visual. So I want to talk about your book and your work with Yale a little bit. So you explore the connection between joy and suffering, how they relate together. Um, and I'm curious, how do you see these as being connected? Like, I mean, some people, I've talked to somebody that said, you can't really actually experience joy unless you've experienced suffering. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting thought. I'm just really curious. What are your thoughts on the connection between joy and suffering? Is it true that we have to go through something really hard to experience joy? What do you think?
Um, Given what I just said a moment ago, no, because I don't
Hmm.
think that, last week needed suffering in order for
Hmm.
me to experience really deep joy.
Hmm.
Um, so Miroslav has said, and I love what he said about this, like joy is not dependent on sorrow,
Hmm.
but it can accompany sorrow.
Hmm.
And so I don't think it's necessary to suffer to experience joy, but joy can absolutely accompany sorrow.
Hmm.
And for me, I actually, before I heard Miroslav say that in that particular way, I was reading Ezra chapter 3 one morning
Hmm.
with the Gale team during the project. We did devotionals together every morning and prayed to start our days. And it was just so incredible as a team to like center ourselves in that way,
Hmm.
um, and pray for each other and like sometimes cry together, laugh together, etc. Um, and we're reading this little part of Ezra 3 that I had never paid attention to in all my years of being a Christian. And Ezra says in this little part, he says that the temple's being rebuilt
Hmm.
and there are people who are watching it and they're rejoicing because they're so excited about what is to come. And then there are also people who are weeping because they are nostalgic, remembering what used to be.
Hmm.
He said it's hard to distinguish the sounds of joy or the sounds of rejoicing from the sounds of weeping.
Hmm.
For me, that really beautifully captures much of life. That
Hmm.
oftentimes, like joy, I think that's why people probably say something like joy needs sorrow or suffering, is because for so many of us, joy and sorrow are very much intermingled,
Hmm.
really in our hearts on a regular basis. I mean,
Hmm.
life is filled with intermingled joy and sorrow,
Hmm.
and also, or like experiences that have them. I mean, every sports event, every major sports event, it's joy and sorrow intermingled. Like
Hmm.
like some group is rejoicing and some group is weeping at the end
Hmm.
when it's like a major sports event. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I have an inclination that that's why people are so drawn to sports. It's
Hmm.
actually this place of collective joy and collective lament, and like human beings need these things so
Hmm.
that we have very few spaces to be a part of collective joy and collective
Hmm.
lament. But also I think that joy and sorrow can live in close proximity together because Andy Root was a part of our project, and he says joy is the very being and presence of God ministering to you, to
Hmm.
us. And so when you're in the midst of profound suffering, when
Hmm.
you're grieving, when you're in sorrow, and God manifests God's self to you, and you sense God's presence and God's goodness, God's love, make grace, mercy in a moment, and it floods you and fills you up, you feel ministered to, you feel
Mm,
seen, you feel heard, and that elicits joy, even if
mhm,
sobering. Alexander Schmemann, the priest, says joy is a bright sorrow.
mm,
And so what he meant by that was that joy is always this thing that we experience where we let the background, like we let the sorrow and suffering and grief of the world to kind of hang in the background for a moment, and we
mhm,
give ourselves over to joy
mm,
instead. Um, yeah, and so because of God's goodness and God's presence in our lives and ministry to us, we can absolutely experience joy in the midst of sorrow.
mm. Yeah, thanks. That's a really good explanation. I think in the data we've looked at what are the emotions that people talked about that were concurrent with joy, and sorrow was right there from time to time, as well as like anxiety and doubt and fear. They were right there in the moment. And I thought that was really special to see that um we don't have to have these isolated emotional experiences. We're whole beings who can experience a range of emotions all at the same time. Um, so we asked the leaders that we talked to in the interviews to describe a challenge, crisis, or crucible that they had experienced in their work. And none of them were really instances of profound suffering for them. There wasn't a major grief or loss that they talked about, but they did talk about some of the demands that they have as leaders of their organizations that might move them into a place of despair temporarily because it's an overwhelming situation or it's incredibly complex. Um, when we asked them about this, we also said, okay, do you tend towards despair or hope in these moments? And then what does it take to get towards hope and joy? Like, what do you have to do? Or what has to happen in the circumstances so that you can start to feel hopeful and start to experience joy again in these really challenging moments? Based on your research and experience, what do you think it takes for somebody to move from something that's really tough to an outlook of hope and then an experience of joy?
Yeah. Um, First of all, you do have to acknowledge the hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like for me, for example, like I've been a part of a Title IX situation in like a work experience at a university. Um, and I think that the greatest thing that anyone above me, so to speak, any boss of mine, any like could have done for me, and no one did. My friends did, certain colleagues did, but what people could have done, what they wanted to do was they just wanted to figure out like what they could do so that I wouldn't to keep like doing my work. Like, what can we do to just like remedy it, fix it?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
what do you need from us to like keep working here?
Mm-hmm.
It was awful. It was an awful response to profound pain in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace, you know? And so what I needed was for them to say something like, what was that like for you?
Mm-hmm.
And um, listen to me and then be a witness to what had happened and say, that sounds awful.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds incredibly sad, incredibly hard. You know, like and really be with me in that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think first of all, when difficult things happen in the workplace, we have to create some sort of space for lament. for
Mm-hmm.
and I talk about in the gravity of joy that I really see God's attention to suffering as witness and witness. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like if we want to lament with someone, then we are witnesses to their pain. Oh, that really happened. I
Mm-hmm.
really see that. I really acknowledge that, and I'm with you. I'm sad with you that this happened. I'm angry with you that this happened,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so that it has to start there. And then
Mm-hmm.
I do think too that repair is important in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not a Christian work environment, it can be really difficult to use a word like forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
But forgiveness or apologies, repair, trying to, you know, figure out what needs to be done in order for you um, to feel like your pain has been acknowledged,
Mm-hmm.
and that you feel And that's the thing, because it's not like that you can just work again. It's different than what I
Mhm.
was saying a moment ago. It's not just fixing it to work again. It's like acknowledging the dignity and worth in someone and being
Mhm.
able to say, what policies need to change here? Is there a systemic thing? Like, it's really looking at the larger picture
Mhm.
and saying, how do we keep this from like happening again?
Mhm.
Um, and um, and how, yeah, and then like, what does it take to repair this?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's not for the sake of work, but for the sake of people in
Mhm.
this place. Um, yeah, so I think those are two things that are really important gateways to joy.
Mhm.
We can't be really, I mean, we can be sad and be joyful,
Mhm.
but we cannot be angry and be joyful at the same time. There are emotions that are actually like close us to joy, that obstruct joy in our life. And rightly so, because anger is signaling something's wrong.
Mhm.
And so that something wrong in the workplace has to be made right before
Mhm.
people can be joyful again.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And then
Yeah.
the and then fear is also a joy. It's interesting that some people thought I would say that fear obstructs joy.
Mhm.
Fear is something when you feel, especially, I mean, maybe if it's Brene Brown says that joy is the scariest emotion. And so
Mhm.
if people are, I would agree if someone is saying something like, the moment I feel joy, I feel scared because I feel like I'm going to lose it.
Mhm.
I feel like, oh my gosh, everything's going so well at work.
Mhm.
Everyone's like so together. We're on the same page. We're doing beautiful things. Like, oh, I don't want this to end. I'm
Mhm.
scared it's going to end. That
Mhm.
makes sense to me.
Mhm.
But I'm scared that I can't be myself.
Mhm.
I'm scared that I don't belong. I'm scared that I'm unseen, that my
Mhm.
ideas are never heard, I'm scared that every time I speak my idea that someone else is going to claim it as their own. I'm scared that I have to assimilate here in order to
Mhm.
like survive. I'm scared that I can never jump off this hamster wheel, and on,
Mhm.
right? That's the kind of fear we're talking. I'm insecure that I'm going to lose my job constantly.
Yeah.
I'm constantly insecure and scared of, like,
Mhm.
that is different, and that's an
Yeah.
obstruction too. So I think that's another part that has to really be worked through with people is
Mhm.
that you come to determine that people on your job, I mean, on your team are consistently insecure and feeling unsafe at work
Mhm.
and fearful, then that's going to be a huge obstruction to joy.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Even as you're talking about that, I'm thinking back to some of the interviews and how people talked about fear and the way you're talking about it. I'm like, I'm wondering if they meant something else there by fear, because they would be talking about, these are like C-suite leaders and executive level leaders. They're talking about, oh, I'm making a big pitch to the board. And so there's some fear that goes with that, and also just some joy and gratitude for the opportunity, right? And so it seems a little mixed up with the hope and anticipation, right? There's almost like this pivot point, right? At which a lot of people talked about relief too, right? Like when there's maybe this fear that's a buildup, the thing happens, whatever the experience happens, and then there's relief and joy.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not quite concurrent. I'll have to go back and look at the data, but that's a really helpful perspective. You said that when you were originally going to start writing the book, it was going to be really practice based. And that kind of takes me into my next question. If you are talking to some folks and just said, I just want to give you some basic practices that you can use to start to cultivate joy in your work, in your leadership, where would you start?
Yeah, so I would have said in 2016 when I started the Project that it's possible to cultivate joy.
Mm-hmm.
I would say now something a little different. I would say that there are a few versions of joy. There is the action of rejoicing,
Mm-hmm.
like, and we can choose to rejoice. We can choose to find something good, truthful, meaningful, beautiful, and rejoice over it. It's so funny. When I put my thumb up, it like put up the thumb emoji. Um, and so we can rejoice. So one, joy is an action. Secondly, joy is a feeling. It's an emotion that follows feeling connected, recognizing meaning, truth, beauty, goodness, our connection to others, and then feeling like it has something to do with us. Then we feel joy, like me and Ro last week at
Mm-hmm.
the ocean. So it's a feeling. Third, it's a characteristic that some people have, joyfulness.
Mhm.
Some people are given, they just like walk around the earth with like the spiritual gift of joy or
Mhm.
joyfulness. And it's a beautiful thing when you encounter those people. They're glass half full kind of people,
Mhm.
we all need someone with the spiritual gift of joyfulness on our team. And then the final thing is that joy is a virtue. And so maybe this is the closest I could get to saying that we could like, I don't know that we can cultivate it as much as we can live open to it. We can,
Mm.
it's sort of an aim or an end
Mhm.
in our life that we live toward. We live
Mhm.
postured toward it. We live open toward it. And I say that because the word for gift, I mean for grace, excuse me, and the word for joy are really similar in the Greek. And so I think joy is a gift. So we
Mm.
can't really make it. I say in the gravity of joy, we can't make it like we make spaghetti, but we
Mhm.
can live open to it. And so I think there are
Mhm.
gateways to joy,
Mhm.
things that we can engage in that allow us to live more open to joy. And two of them I've already mentioned, which are forgiveness and lament.
Mhm.
Make way for joy, I
Mm.
think. Um,
Mm.
because forgiveness makes way for grace and
Mm.
freedom. And those things are really like beautiful, sort of like ways to set the table for joy, grace, and
Mhm.
freedom. And then lament allows us to be ministered to by God and by
Mm.
others, which allows us to live open to joy. A couple of others that I think are really important in the workplace, or three of them. Um, One is gratitude for each other
Mm.
and for the work. I mean, and it's one thing, once a year to give out awards to everybody or to do a retreat and to say like, great work, I loved this or whatever. It's really another on a regular basis, like a weekly basis, to look around at your team, at the people around you, and to really be appreciative to them for what they bring
Mhm.
to the table, for what they've done, or something like that. But there's also a gratitude just for who they are. Uh,
Mm.
I love this Zach Mercurio. He writes about mattering, and he says there's like two um, like sides of the same coin for mattering in like in the workplace. And one is you add value. And I think a lot of us think of that like, okay, like you're able, you do this really well. And so we highlight this and we're very thankful to you because like you're a marketing person and you're so good at it. Like that was awesome how you read that, like led that last campaign, and that's a really important, like you've done great work on this specific thing. But the other side of the coin to like mattering in the workplace is the sense that I value you.
Mhm.
So it means like I would, if I'm on your team, Meryl, like I know that if you have children, I don't even know this about you, but if you have children, like I know that your child had a really important soccer game last weekend and you were at a tournament, or whatever with them. And I ask you, like, how did that go? Or you're out sick for a few days and I'm like checking on you, like, hey, how
Mhm.
are you feeling? Now, I was so sad that you weren't here last week. Like, I
Mhm.
missed having you around, like you as a human,
Mhm.
like as a
Mhm.
person. So
Mhm.
gratitude for people's work, but also for who they are as humans
Mhm.
on your team. A
Mhm.
second thing that's really, really important is, and similar and related, is truth telling.
Mm.
Um, we often think of truth telling as telling people what we really think, but like in a counterfeit form of love. Like, I'm
Mhm.
gonna tell you the truth, but like I love you, but I'm gonna really just like tell you what you need to know.
Mhm.
And that might be one version of it, but Christine Pohl, she was a Christian ethicist, and she says in her book, Living into Community, that truth telling is the affirmation of what is good and true
Mm.
world. And so it's really this practice of looking at people around us and telling the truth about them, which is, hey, I noticed that last year you were really nervous to give presentations in front of everybody. And now you're really confident. And it's incredible to watch your confidence grow like that because you
Mhm.
do have something to say. You have something to share. You have like a beautiful way of thinking about things in this
Mm.
workplace that's so needed.
Mm.
It's with telling the truth, like affirming what is good and true in someone.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness, I noticed that every time we leave the staff meeting, you encourage the people next to you. And I just want to say, like, that's such a beautiful gift in this place,
Mhm.
like to just like have someone who's so encouraging like you. So just looking for what's good and true and affirming it in other
Mhm.
people and in the world. And it's really the opposite of being in a really negative workplace or negative group with people.
Mhm.
Because groupthink can go either way. Like when we go negative, like everyone's like, yeah, we have this many meetings today. We have this huge project. We have this deadline. I'm so anxious. There's so much to do. We're spending and spending, you know, or we can have this environment, this life-giving work environment of like really cherishing one another and the work we get to do, not the work we have to do. And then finally, I think a real game changer in a workplace is retrospective joy. And that is backward looking joy. And this is taking really intentional time in your staff meetings or at your annual retreat or annual workplace sabbatical moment, whatever that is. And that's the thing, if like you're listening and you don't have moments where you pause as a team and reflect on what you've done in the previous 3 months or 6 months, like that's a problem. Because what happens in a workplace that never celebrates the good, that never looks back and says, this was really beautiful, this was really meaningful, we were so connected, is that people do feel, one, like a cog in the machine. Two, they feel like the work never ends because there's never a final, like, let's let this go, let's celebrate this and then like release it or whatever. It's just on to the next thing.
Mm.
And so, right. And then people, so it just feels like work is like this, and it doesn't really matter if we like, you know, if I'm here or not, it just keeps going like this, you know, it's just, but stopping and reflecting is like, oh yeah, like that was valuable. That mattered. That made a difference. And so it's looking back at something and saying, how did that project make a difference in the world? How did this thing that we released impact other organizations or communities? Like, how did this product, you know, how did we work together as a team in really helpful ways? You know, these sorts of things. And then, and that retrospective joy carries us forward so that when we are, and all of these things do really, like when I feel gratitude for people in my heart and I feel that they're grateful for me and my work, when I am constantly looking to affirm the good in others and the true in them, and then they do it for me. And when we're had this consistent practice of retrospective joy as a team, those things fill up my tank so much that when we have a difficult work day together and you really tick me off and like you get on my last nerve, or we're not like we're running up against a deadline and I'm feeling the anxiety or whatever else that it is, like I have that well to draw from, you know, with you, with our team and everything like that. And I don't just want to leave. Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of those examples. The common thread I was hearing in all of them was that you're not really focusing on getting like your personal experience of joy in those moments. It's really outward focused. You're focusing on others and on making a difference in their lives and serving them or celebrating the team as opposed to the individual effort, like your individual effort on something. And so to me, that points back to what we talked about at the beginning, that joy is very relational. It's this life together, celebrating what's good and true and beautiful and experiencing that. Okay, I'm going to give you the last word on joy. What is on top of your mind that you'd like to leave us with as we think about cultivating joy as leaders?
Mm. Jürgen Moltmann passed away a number of weeks ago. He was an incredible German theologian, probably one of the top three like theologians of the 20th century. And one of his like famous things is like a theology of hope. And he talks about how hope is the anticipation of joy. And so I think a lot of times people think that hope is the opposite of despair, but I think that like joy is the ultimate counteragent to despair. And hope is on its way to joy. And so you absolutely need it. And I think it's why it's important, like it's another gateway to joy. But I think just realizing that gratitude, things like that we've been talking about, gratitude, truth telling, retrospective joy, they're not supplements that make for like a fun work environment.
Mhm.
They literally will save people's lives.
Mhm.
They will literally save us from despair.
Mhm.
They're the sorts of things that make life worth getting up for every day. So they're not just things that you do, once a year that you do to like hopefully like look like a good boss. Like they are essential for
Mhm.
life-giving work environments and for things that sustain people's lives.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Angela, thanks so much for joining me for this conversation today. It's been a pleasure having you and hearing about your vast knowledge on joy and that's come from your research and your experience. So thanks for sharing it with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate your questions.